So hello and thank you for joining our TQ administration webinar, and this is for the moderated element of the technical qualifications. We're going to play a recording produced by our chief moderator, and that will provide you with everything you need to know to plan for the moderated element of the technical qualifications, but also it'll give you the information you need that you'll be sharing with your moderator. On the video, a link will be shared to a recording on the YouTube channel, and I'm going to share that link in the chat box here because you won't be able to click on the link when you see it, but we will share it in the chat for you. And that will be intended to watch in your own time. Watch after this event, please. At the end of the video, there'll be an opportunity to answer your questions, so please post any questions in the question box. We will do our best to ensure that all questions are answered. But if there are any outstanding unanswered questions, we will collate them and share the answers to all questions and share these with you after today's event. And there's also just a quick reminder that there'll be a short evaluation survey at the end of the session. It'll come up automatically as you log out, and we really would encourage you to fill that in for us. We do appreciate your feedback and suggestions for improvement. Okay, so welcome to today's session. My name's Helen Scanlon. You've got myself and Sarah here from the provider development team. We support all our centres who deliver our qualifications, but we focus very much on teaching and learning. So you might have heard our voices, you might have met us, but Sarah and I are part of the provider development team. I'm going to hand over to Joanne, who's a different part of NCFE. Joanne, it's over to you.
Hello, I'm just going to introduce myself. So I'm Joanne Patton. I am a moderator for the T-level in education and childcare. Some of you might have met me before. I'm predominantly based in the southwest of England and also covering some of the south of England. So if you're in those areas, I might have met you. I'm going to be present today for the webinar and hopefully answering some of your questions at the end. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks Joanne. And we've also got Kelly here as well, who will also help us answer some of your questions. So moving on, we're going to start off with a vote, please. We want to ask you, how confident do you feel before starting today's session about the moderation process for the technical qualification? We're going to ask you to do this on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being low and 10 being high. So I'm just going to launch the poll now and ask you to choose the most appropriate number. How you feel right now about moderation of the technical qualification, please. Lovely, votes are coming in. Thank you so much. We normally ask this question at the beginning of all of our sessions, and it's quite right that there's a range of answers. Some people feeling quite confident and some people feeling not so confident. So obviously our plan today is to improve that confidence level by the activity that we're going to share. So we're at 75% of voting completed. I'm just going to give it a little while longer before I close the poll and share the results. But as I say, we're asking about how confident you feel about the moderation process for the TQ or technical qualification. So just another very quick explanation of the TQ stands for the technical qualification. That's the part of the T-level that NCFE manage on behalf of IFET. Another few seconds, just in case you haven't had the chance. I'm just going to leave that poll open for a little while longer and I'll share the results. Okay, I've closed that now. Just going to quickly share the results, and you'll see that the majority of people are down between the 1 and 4, which was, what we expect when something's new. We've got some people at 5 and 6 and some higher up at 7 and 8. So the plan for today is to get that a bit higher. Just another quick reminder as well that we really want you to share your questions, have the opportunity to ask them, and use the question box in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. So my next job now is to run the video for you. So as you watch this, please do think of any questions you've got.
Welcome to the administration training for moderation. Our agenda today will take you through the key points of the moderation process to ensure that you feel fully prepared for the moderation activities taking place during the second year of the technical qualification. In addition to this webinar, please do be reminded of our other resources available on QualHub. I will go through these towards the end of the presentation. The webinar today will take you through the aims and objectives for the session, moderation models, the schedule of assessment, planning your observations and moderation visits, record keeping, moderation, including final moderation for education and childcare, and further support and guidance available. Whilst this session does focus mainly on the assessor and moderator, it continues to be best practice for the EQA to continue with internal quality assurance activities reflecting the policy and processes of individual providers. This session aims to update you on the moderation processes and what to expect in addition to reminding you of the information previously shared to efficiently complete all administration activities required. We will provide an overview of the various forms and processes that you need to follow to ensure that you have everything in place for moderation. Our objectives for the session are that providers will know how and when and if a moderator will be allocated, and assessors completing occupational specialism assessments will be prepared for moderation visits and associated activity for assignment 2 of education and childcare. At the end of the webinar, we will answer any questions that you may have. If, in the event of not being able to answer any questions, we will respond to all questions asked and we will share the responses using your provided contact details. So, moderation models. There are 2 moderation models. The first is a visiting moderation model, and this applies to education and childcare T level only. This is where a provider will be allocated a moderator, and the moderator will carry out face-to-face visits to observe students alongside the provider assessors at the industry placement. Each occupational specialism will be allocated individually. Therefore, you may have a different moderator for early years educator and assisting teaching. Moderation will take place throughout the assessment window, with final moderation taking place after the assessment window for assignment 2 closes. It is important to remember that depending on the outcome of final moderation, some remote moderation may still be required for education and childcare. The second moderation model is a remote model, and this applies to health, healthcare science, and science T levels. All moderation is carried out remotely. Therefore, providers will not receive notification of allocation of a moderator. To clarify, there will be no face-to-face moderation for these occupational specialisms. Moderation will be carried out after the assessment window closes, and this will involve moderation of recordings of assessments completed by the provider assessors and shared with NCFE securely for remote moderation. Further details on this process will be clarified at the standardisation training events planned for January 2023. The administration processes focused on in this session are mainly for the visiting moderation model. So how will education and childcare providers be allocated a moderator? All providers will be allocated a moderator for the second year of the education and childcare T level. All year 2 students will be in scope for the moderation of assignment 2. Registered students must also be booked onto the appropriate occupational specialism, and it is only at this point that a moderator will be allocated. We do have an extended date for bookings onto the occupational specialism. However, it is advised as best practice that students should be booked onto the occupational specialism as early as possible to allow for more effective planning of moderation. This is equally important for all students on all T levels. The link here shows where the key date schedule can be found for a reminder of the assessment windows for 2022 and 23 series. We have already received some questions regarding the allocation of moderators. How will I know who my moderator is? We have a team of regional moderators, and we will contact you to confirm allocation of moderator, and this will be followed by an introductory email from your allocated moderator. Moderators are allocated at the beginning of each session. The email you receive will also signpost you to the schedule of assessment and other moderation guidance documents. Another question we have been asked is, will my current EQA also be my moderator? So the moderator role is completed by an occupationally competent sector specialist who is taken on specifically for this role. All other quality assurance activities related to T levels, such as approvals and annual monitoring reviews or AMRs, will be completed by the EQA team. The schedule of assessment and booking visits. Your allocated moderator will work with you to plan your moderation visits. Before visits can be planned, you will need to complete the schedule of assessment within the provider portal. We will now demonstrate where you can find the schedule of assessment and explain the detail needed to plan the observations with your moderator. As a reminder, the schedule of assessment only needs to be completed for the visiting moderation model.
Hello, it's Helen here. I've just paused the video because what Jackie was referring to there is the link that we're going to provide, or we have provided in the chat, which would be the video that Jackie refers to for that. So I'm going to restart the recording. The section on how to book these is on the video that I've just put the link to in the chat. But as I say, please don't click on that for the moment. We're going to go back to the recording.
The next few slides will take you through the documents and records needed for moderation visits. Effective and robust record keeping is an important factor when ensuring sufficient quality. All assessors will need to complete the below forms when assessing learners for Early Years Educator Part 1 and Early Years Educator Part 2 and Assisting Teaching. Examples of these forms can be found in tutor guides available in the supporting documents section of QualHub. The observation planning form. This form should be used to plan the observations the assessor will make of the student at their industry placement. The form will detail the date of the observations, the intended activity to be observed, and the criteria expected to be covered based on the mapping of criteria in this pack and the student guide. It is critically important that the assessor summarises what they have observed in relation to the criteria and guidance provided in the observation form. If there is no summary present, or if the summary lacks sufficient detail, then there is no record of evidence, and the provider would therefore be required to observe the student again. Observation of skills recording form. This form should be used to make a narrative record of each observation conducted by the assessor. Each observation form must be numbered for referencing purposes, and the observation narrative must be linked to the specific criteria during the observation. Professional discussion form. Most criteria should be covered through observation. However, where this is not possible and where the qualification specification states it is allowed, a professional discussion can be used. In these instances, this form should be used. It must be numbered with the same number as the observation of skills form and linked to the criteria that the assessor has covered during the discussion. When you have been allocated your moderator will also be able to support you in how to use the risk-based approach for the 2021 cohort of students. The assessor may choose to use a digital voice recorder to capture the professional discussion. The assessment justification sections have been developed to support the assessor and recommends the most appropriate assessment methods. Where direct observation is identified as the method of assessment, students must evidence this skill through a direct observation. However, evidence may be complemented through a professional discussion. Assessors are reminded that whilst students may have notes or work to refer to during professional discussion, the assessment should enable the student to apply their knowledge appropriately. Therefore, the student should not use notes as a script, but rather as a prompt. And this is particularly important for professional discussions completed as part of the structured observations. And this will be covered more at the standardisation training. Criteria, assessor judgment guidance and assessment justification. So when completing the structured observation set piece assessments, each criteria must have a marking judgment and justification to support the outcome of the assessment. Justification should link back to each relevant criteria on the observation recording form and, where appropriate, any professional discussion record. And these forms should be completed after each structured observation. Please note that a justification should be complete for EYE Part 1. However, these observations are not marked with a numerical outcome. Records should justify where a student has met the expected criteria or has not yet met the criteria accordingly. Final mark form. This form must be used to capture a final mark for each structured observation. There will be a deadline in the final year of each student's T-level qualification for these final marks to be submitted. Please note, the final marks are submitted via the portal and we do not require the final mark form to be submitted. As a reminder, all key dates can be found in the key date schedule. Assessors must also maintain a record of the learner's placement hours, and the moderator and assessor must retain records to track the criteria that has been observed. And the criteria observed will also be included in the moderator's report, which will be sent to the product account manager after the visit. It's really important that you check who your contacts are at the point of visit so that the report goes to the relevant person. Please also note that the report will only include the criteria observed for EYE Part 1. It's really important, vitally important, that sufficient detail is captured in the observation record. Let's take time to review some of the support resources available on QualHub for Assignment 2. Early Years Educator Part 1. The competence criteria for the early years educator is available as a guidance document. Within the document, there are examples of the forms covered in the previous slide. Guidance is provided for each of the criteria. Some criteria have been grouped as they are often observed holistically, and this will also be helpful when planning observations. The guidance includes the following: the skills to be assessed and confirms if the professional discussion is allowed. Assessor judgment guidance. This is divided into two columns: working towards competence and competence. An assessment justification provides guidance on what the assessor could expect to see during the assessment, and a link to the document is included. Let's take a look at a specific example. Some of you will have noticed that there are two documents on QualHub. I've taken this example from the exemplar document. I've split the page over the next 3 slides to show what the guidance includes, and I have used EYE criteria 2.6. The criteria is to support and promote children's speech, language and communication development using a range of strategies. So the assessed skills would be what the student is able to demonstrate, such as the student demonstrates using visual aids and signs in the environment, using bilingual resources, modelling language, using appropriate questioning techniques for age and stage, instigating high quality adult to child verbal interactions, using songs, rhymes and storytelling, following children's leads and giving children time to respond, using an interpreter, one-to-one support, and it should be noted that a professional discussion is allowed and can be used to support the achievement of this criteria. The assessor judgment guidance clarifies what working towards competence and a competence mark would look like. So in this instance, working towards, the student would demonstrate limited or inconsistent use of strategies to support and promote children's speech, language and communication, and lacks confidence in implementing strategies to support and promote children's speech, language and communication. A student marked as competent would demonstrate a range of strategies to support and promote children's speech, language and communication development. And finally, let's look at the assessment justification for this criteria. Remember, this criteria will be observed and can also include a professional discussion. You would choose to plan to cover in the professional discussion any aspects of the criteria that can't naturally be included in the observation or where planned opportunities do not happen, to enable the student to fully reach the scope of the assessed criteria. The assessor must be able to observe the student modelling language, instigating high quality adult to child communication relevant to the child's age stage, including one-to-one support. So during these interactions, the student should be able to use appropriate questioning techniques for the age and stage as they extend learning and provoke sustained shared thinking, following the children's leads and giving children time to respond. The student must be able to confidently share stories and sing songs, rhymes with the children. The assessor should extend understanding by leading a discussion around strategies for speech, communication and language, and needs to include using visual aids and signs in the environment, using bilingual resources, using an interpreter. During the professional discussion, the student would also demonstrate understanding of systematic synthetic phonics in the teaching of reading and a range of strategies for developing early literacy and mathematics. During the professional discussion, the student may wish to share other supporting evidence, such as reflective accounts or work products. As earlier mentioned, the observation record must include exactly what has been observed, so much so that if a colleague was to assess the same piece of evidence, they would reach the same assessment judgment. Early Years Educator Part 2 and Assisting Teaching. The Tutor Guidance for Early Years Educator Part 2 and Assisting Teaching also provides examples of activities that enable learners to demonstrate the criteria for each structured observation. There are written examples of expectations for students being marked as a pass and examples of students being marked as a distinction. Exemplar forms are completed. The observation planning form detailing the planned activity and the criteria expected to be covered. The observation of skills planning form captures the record of the observed activity and annotations of assessed criteria observed. And the professional discussion form captures the record of discussion and is annotated to show the criteria. The structured observation marking criteria, this includes feedback and justification, and the marking bands are used to mark the outcome of the observation against each criteria. We appreciate that further support is needed for this part of assignment 2, and we will be delivering standardisation training to explore the marking further. And this will support further and ensure a standardised approach is applied to the structured observations and the marking of the structured observations. Assignment 2 for the Education and Childcare T-level is marked by the provider and moderated by NCFE. As a reminder, Assignment 2 consists of 2 parts for the Early Years Educator Occupational Specialism and 1 part for the Assisting Teaching Occupational Specialism. Early Years Educator Part 1 includes the observations completed to reflect the Early Years Educator competence criteria. Assessors can start to observe students as soon as they are ready, and this can begin in Year 1. There is no limit to the number of observations completed. Moderators will moderate students during the 2nd year of the T-level programme. Moderators will visit the industry placement and complete observations of the student alongside the assessor. Following the observation, the moderator will review the observation records and confirm the accuracy of assessment decisions. The moderator will provide developmental feedback and guidance to the assessor. All assessment records relating to the observation will be reviewed. If criteria have not been met, the moderator and assessor will discuss what an achievement might look like, and the moderator and assessor will also discuss the criteria that has been met. And there will be an opportunity to discuss any missed criteria. The moderator will also review other records of students not from the chosen sample, and this will enable the moderator to ensure that sufficient detail is being captured and that records are being kept accurately. Part 1 is moderated on a continuous basis. Moderators will attend a sample of observations carried out by the assessor, and they will observe students alongside the assessor and will confirm whether they agree with the assessor's judgments. Where there is agreement across all criteria, the provider continues to assess, and student outcomes for competence are accepted by NCFE for the remainder of the cohort, and no further moderation of Assignment 2 Part 1 will be required. Where there is not full agreement, the moderator can provide feedback and flag any relevant criteria for a further check. A further moderation visit would then be required to observe assessment of the relevant criteria. Agreement must be reached across all criteria before the provider is signed off to submit overall outcomes for Assignment 2 Part 1, and this process will be repeated for every cohort. It's important to remember that the moderation process is a validation of any observations that have been completed within year 1. Early Years Educator Part 2 and Assisting Teaching. Structured observations are summative assessments and should be completed within the assessment window. The moderator will select structured observations to moderate to ensure that criteria worth at least 40% of the overall mark are covered for each student in the sample. The moderator will select a student, and each student will be observed twice by the moderator in order to meet this minimum threshold. They will also ensure that all structured observations are moderated across the sample. Moderators will visit the industry placements and will observe the assessment taking place, accompanying the provider's assessor and observing the student carrying out their structured observation. The moderator will make assessment judgments, including the allocation of marks on assignment 2, using the same method as the provider. All records and findings will be documented separately to the provider's assessor to ensure that the two sets of findings can reliably be compared. In addition, the moderator will also review records of observations and discussions taken by the provider during the visit to ensure that sufficient detail is being captured to support robust and reliable remote moderation and review of assessment. The outcome of observation or marks will not be discussed or compared. As structured observations are a set-piece assessment, all aspects of the assessment should be planned to be completed within the observation time. This includes the professional discussion. Any professional discussion should be contextualised to the observation accordingly. Therefore, it needs to be completed as one set assessment. The moderator will not discuss any marks with the assessor. It should also be noted that structured observations are designed to be completed within 1 hour. Final marks will only be submitted by the provider via the portal once structured observations have been completed and marked. Final marks are only agreed as final following final moderation. The window for Early Years Educator Part 1 moderation is September through to the end of January. We recognise that the situation of moderation is new for many providers. The window does open on the 1st of September and closes on the 31st of January. We will work with you to plan the visits accordingly and to support you to ensure that moderation is completed within the moderation window. It should be noted that whilst moderation is completed within that window, students will have until the close of the assessment window to complete Early Years Educator Part 1. For Part 2 Early Years Educator and Assisting Teaching, moderators will attend a sample of structured observations carried out by the provider appointed assessors during the assessment window. The observations they attend will be selected by NCFE based on the provider's schedule of assessment and in line with the assessment sampling strategy. Final moderation will take place between May and June, with an occupational specialism outcome confirmed in August. Your moderator will always also share our guidance documents with you. Once you have completed all structured observations, you will need to submit learner marks for moderation. The moderator will also request a sample of assessment records. All requested forms All mandatory forms must be submitted to NCFE by the end of the assessment window, and there will be 3 potential outcomes from this activity. Outcome 1, the moderator and provider marks are within tolerance, and in this case, all of the provider marks will be accepted with no further action required. Outcome 2, the moderator and provider marks are out of tolerance, but they are out of tolerance in a consistent way. For example, they are all too lenient or they are all too strict. In this case, a further sample will be requested to see that this is consistent with the wider sample. A calculation would then be applied to compare the providers and moderators' marks in order to determine the required adjustment for each student. And this adjustment will then be applied to all students within the cohort. Outcome 3 is when the moderator and provider marks are out of tolerance, but not in a consistent way that can be safely adjusted. In this case, the remainder of the cohort may need to be moderated remotely. In this instance, the moderator mark would be taken forward, and all students would be allocated the moderator mark within the cohort. On this slide, you will see some of the support available. The standardisation training webinars to be held for each T level with a specific focus on each occupational specialism, with some dates to be confirmed. The education and childcare standardisation training will be held on the 8th of November. We have other CPD events that are available for booking on the website. Our moderation guides, links can be found under Centre Support. We have our qualification specifications and other supporting documents for individual assignments and moderated assessments. The Chief Moderator reports for the Summer 2022 series. There are some key points for consideration highlighted, and it is recommended that these are read prior to completion of assessments. For providers who have already been through the final moderation process, your allocated moderator will agree a support plan with you during the first visit of the session. Moderators are already booking visits. There are still some dates available in October, but dates are getting booked up quickly. Thank you for taking the time to listen and engage with the webinar. I hope that this session has helped to answer many of your questions and provide you with the information that you need. We would, however, like to take this opportunity to answer some of the questions that you have been posting to the comments box.
Hi, thank you for taking the time to listen to the webinar and for posting some of your questions. We hope that this session has helped to answer a lot of your questions and to provide you with the information that you need. But I have been looking through some of the questions that have been posted and we'd like to take this opportunity to try and answer some of them. So one question that has been posted is, can I capture a professional discussion electronically? So Joe, are you able to answer that question?
Hi, yeah, I can answer that one. Yes, you can capture the professional discussion electronically. We're also aware that some providers might be using e-portfolios, and that's also okay. just to remind everybody to refer to the guidance for further detail, but the records that are captured for professional discussion need a clear audit trail with sufficient detail to justify the outcome of assessment.
I think that I can answer that if Jo isn't available. The answer is yes, you can capture the professional discussion electronically. We're aware that some of you may be using e-portfolios, but please refer to the guidance for more detail. But records must have a clear audit trail with sufficient detail to justify the outcome of assessment. So let's look. Another question that we were asked were, can I use an expert witness testimony from a placement? I think I can take that one as well. The assessor must complete all of the assessments for assignment 2. These are captured by an observation or where stated a professional discussion can be used. During the professional discussion, the student can make reference to any work products, and they may also want to include any feedback from work or placement mentors, etc. Just scrolling through to see if we've got any more questions. Can I use a professional discussion to meet any criteria not observed? And the answer to that is yes. You can only use a professional discussion where the criteria states that this is allowed. If it states that the criteria must be observed, this will need to be planned and assessed by observation. So in that instance, you wouldn't be able to use a professional discussion. So where the criteria states that it is allowed, then that's absolutely fine. But where the criteria says that it must be observed, then you'll need to make sure that you do plan to observe that criteria.
Kelly, it's Helen. Can I just jump in a sec?
How should we rank students?
I don't think Kelly can hear us.
So you can rank order your students based on factors including their performance in year 1, or their expected final grade, or their expected performance in the structured observations. You'll need to use a numerical order, with 1 being the strongest when you're ranking your learners. And a maximum of 5 students can have the same rank order number. Another question is, what age group should we be looking for EYE? So when you're completing the early years educational occupational specialism, the learners being observed should either be in nursery or early years or in a reception class of a primary school. But if you want any more information on that, you can refer to the Chief Moderator report, which highlights the importance of this. I'm just having a look through some of the comments, and I think that we've managed to answer most of them. But what we are going to do is any questions that we haven't been able to answer, we will take them away and collate a response for you, and that will be sent along with the slides. So just a quick reminder that the session is being recorded, so you can play it back. And like I said before, any questions that we haven't addressed, we will make sure that we do answer them, and we'll circulate those to you along with the slides. I'm just going to pass you over to Helen now, who's got another poll for you to complete.
Thanks, Kelly. I've got another couple of questions that have come through as well that I'm going to pose to Joanne, if that's okay with you, Joanne?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. If you can hear me okay.
Yes, I can hear you fine. So I'm just going to go back to the question here. We have a first-year assessor who has now left the department. Will they still need to be moderated as they carried out most of the first-year observations? So you've got assessor who's been doing observations in year 1. What happens to their assessment decisions for in year 2?
Okay, so yeah, there's a couple of options. They will still need to be, their assessment decisions will still need to be moderated, and that can either be done through the moderator reviewing previous documents. What would be good for the provider to do is as part of their quality assurance and their internal processes to decide how they are going to accept that evidence. So if a new assessor is taking the student through their EYE Part 1, they might decide to look over the previous assessments to make that judgment on competency. But the moderator can talk through how to do that. But we would need to have a look at some records from year 1 as well.
Brilliant. So that centre, that was for you, Amy, your question. Are they best to speak to their moderator then about that specifically?
Yes, I think it would be best to speak to their allocated moderator if they've got one already, and they can discuss that further.
Lovely, excellent. The next question, does the structure used last year still apply to this year? As I was given by my moderator a list of the criteria and then each was coded to if it needed to be observed or not, and if a discussion could take place instead, or was that just because of COVID restrictions last year? What's your thoughts there?
Okay, so I think this person's referring to the risk-rated approach for the early years educator competency criteria. It is also in place this year, so that is as a result of COVID and some placements not being open for the full amount of time, or placement hours, etc. So yes, that's still in place for this cohort, for the second year students for this year, and it's on our Qual Hub as well for providers to access.
Brilliant. Charlotte has said yes, it's risk rated. Sorry, I forgot that what it was called. Thank you. Brilliant. So hopefully, Charlotte, that answers that question for you fully. We've had a lot of talk today about education and childcare. Can you share anything about the difference between that and the health and the other new specialisms for this year?
Yeah, I mean, so the reason we focus more on the early years educator in this webinar is because that's the TQ that has the visiting moderator model. So there's more sort of happening now at this point. The health, I believe there's going to be further updates in January on how the remote moderation aspect of that health TQ works. So I believe that's going to be in January, so there will be more information. But the key date schedule and the information that Jackie gave out at the beginning is still relevant to the health T level.
Brilliant. And is that the case for digital as well, do you know?
I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid, sorry.
Right, not to worry, that'll be something we'll take up at a later date. Thank you. I think that's all the questions I had. Did you have anything else, Joanne, that you wanted to share?
No, I think everything, we went through all the questions. Hopefully you could hear me okay, because I know there was a couple of issues with sound, but thank you all for your time today.
Yes, we could hear you fine. I think it's an internal technical issue. So as Kelly said, I'm going to move on to the final poll. And just a case of now, how do you feel? And do you feel, what's your confidence level now with the moderation? So I'm just going to launch that next poll, and we're asking you to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low and 10 being high. Where do you put yourself now after listening to Jackie's points and the question and answers that we've had? And there will still be a range of confidence levels. We're fully aware of this, but we are here to support and guide and help you through these new assessment methods. So please keep in touch with us, ask us questions, and get support of the relevant NCFE staff. We're at 58% for the voting, so I'm just going to leave that open a little while longer. I'm just going to leave that a few more seconds. If you haven't had the chance to vote, please let us know. Brilliant, we're up to nearly 70% again now, so I'm going to close it shortly. Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to share the results again, and as you can see, there are fewer people at the lower end now, so that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Please do keep asking us the questions, pop them into the question box. If you feel you have a question that hasn't been answered or you haven't had the chance to ask it yet, we will stay on the call a bit longer. We are finished a little bit earlier than planned, so you can have some time back as well. But also, as I say, we're not going anywhere. If you want to stay on the call and put questions in the question box, please feel free to do so. Another reminder, I put questions in the question box. We're not going anywhere. We're still here, so please do pop them in there. We are not going anywhere just yet. Thanks again for attending. As I say, we know how precious your time is. The quick evaluation form will pop up as you log out, so please pop things into that on the way out. We do value your feedback and we do use it. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you to Joanne and Kelly for your input. Generally, I think people's feedback so far is positive. So we do have a question which I'm going to pose to Joanne. It says we've got Katrin standing in for their T-level course director. What should she be doing? Sorry, Katrin, which T-level or T-levels are you delivering and assessing? Just so we can make the education childcare. So are you entering year 1 or year 2? Right. So Katrin's centre's entering year 2 of E&C. Joanne, you're an experienced moderator now, so can you help Katrin know what they should be doing? Just as you must be doing this by now, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next thing I would suggest you do is after this coming out of this meeting is having a look at the YouTube link that we posted in the chat. That's got sort of like the next steps for moderation. So what initially, in order to be allocated your moderator, you need to book your students onto the relevant occupational specialism. So whether that's the early years educator or the assisting teaching, and input some relevant information to the schedule of assessment on the portal. Once that's been done, you then get allocated a moderator, and your moderator will be in touch with you to plan the first visit. So that YouTube clip that's in the chat would be the next starting point for you, really. I think would be a good one to have a look at. Hopefully
Lovely, thanks, Joanne. I've put it back into the chat as well, so it's there again.
Brilliant.
I'm just double checking the question box. That was great. Yes, so pass that on. Wonderful. Anything else at all, Joanne, that you want to share that people might find a little nugget?
The only other thing I would suggest is if for those of you that haven't had a chance to have a look, the Chief Moderator's report is a really good summary of the moderation from last year and an overview of the experiences moderators had. So got some really good best practice tips in the Chief Moderator's report, so it's definitely worth a look in terms of best practice, and that's on QualHub as well.
Lovely. And any other top tips for the remote moderation for the other TQs on?
I haven't worked with any of the other TQs. The only top tip I would say that record keeping will be in every instance of remote moderation really important. So what Jackie was saying about the importance of the justifications and the summary of your records for anything that's going to be sent remotely, that would be key, I would say.
Yes, a really good point. So any standardization moderation activities that take place within centres, should they be record kept carefully?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And remember that remote moderation will take place by moderators who won't actually meet the students themselves, and therefore make no assumptions in your recording of competencies and assessment activities. Please, the devil is in the detail for remote moderators. You need to let them know exactly how the students performed. You will know things about the students that you know and therefore will use to make a judgment. You've got to make sure that the moderator knows those things as well. Would you agree with that, Joanne?
Absolutely, yeah. And we've experienced that with remote moderation last year, that we will probably ask for further samples to moderate remotely, and the detail is really, really key for those, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, there's no more questions have come through, so I'm going to end today's webinar now. If you do have questions still, please get in touch with us. Customer support team is there for you to support you, just as the name says. So please do continue to stay in touch with us, ask us questions, seek clarification where it's needed, but also all the documents that are on QualHub, Chief Moderator's Guide, the Tutor's Guides, the key date schedules, the assessment regulations, the provider guides, they're all there to support you. So please access and use them. They're very useful. And to date, our T-level centres have said how useful they've found all of those documents. So information's all there. It might be in multiple places as well, just to make sure that you get access to it. But please do use QualHub and keep in touch. Thank you very much for your time today. And thank you if you've listened to the recording as well. We're here to support. Thanks ever so much.